Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell Rhodes.
Hey there, superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to another episode designed to help you better lead at the top of your game. You know, persuasion is a powerful tool for any leader to possess. And did you know that there are 14 brain triggers that not only activate the emotion centers of the brain, but are also key to persuading others to follow your lead? If you master these triggers, you'll find it a ton easier to capture the attention of others and become unforgettable. On today's show, I'm pleased to have as our guest a fellow who is not only an expert on these brain triggers, but who also has one of the coolest names ever. His name is James Bond, but his middle initial is I, so James I. Bond. James is a former advertising exec for enterprise-level corporations who evolved his career to become one of the leading behavioral management specialists across the country. He's also the author of the award-winning book, Brain Glue: How Selling Becomes Much Easier by Making Your Ideas Sticky. One of the things that I loved about my conversation with James is his numerous examples of standout individuals, such as yourself, and companies who have used these triggers to gain a permanent emplacement in all of our minds. This episode will give you insights on how you too can use these triggers to persuade others when needed in your daily professional life. And remember to just stay tuned for 2 minutes after the episode to listen to my closing segment called Karen's Take, where I share a tip on how to use insights from today's episode to further sharpen your leadership acumen. And now, enjoy the show. Hey there, superstars. Welcome to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. Boy, do we have a fantastic guest for you today, and one that has one of the coolest names you'll ever hear, if I must say so myself. We're so pleased to have on today's show James Bond, which is his middle initial is I, James I. Bond, who is one of America's leading behavioral management specialists and the author of the award-winning book, Brain Glue: How Selling Becomes Much Easier by Making Your Ideas Sticky. So welcome to the podcast, James.
Oh, thank you for having me, Karen. Nice to be here. Great to be here.
It's
Actually, your
wonderful to have
podcasts are
you.
awesome.
Hello, thank you. Well, we are so pleased to have you. And I had mentioned that one of the reasons that I sought out you being a guest is because of some of the lessons you have in your book around selling and persuasion and influence. And these are skills that, any leader who's trying to lead at the top of their game are needing to have. But before we delve into that, we'd love to learn just a sneak peek about you on a personal level. So just as much as you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing a little bit about, your background, your personal background, like where you grew up, a little bit about your professional history, and maybe any hobbies that you'd love to share that you have?
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Montreal, Canada, and I've lived in Southern California for 34 years. And the reason I know that is because we have a son and 3 daughters, and our middle daughter, we gave her the initials LA, Lauren Asia, AJA. So we'd remember that every time people ask, like, how long have you been in California? We go like, how old's Lauren again? So that really works. So
A mind
thank you,
trick,
Lauren.
right?
Lauren's our awesome daughter. Well, all our kids are awesome. Let me start there. Okay, let me
Yes,
correct
let's
myself.
go back and say that all your kids are awesome.
Yeah, they are awesome. But I ran an advertising agency in Montreal, and I worked my way up and eventually won some of the world's biggest clients: Kraft Foods, Timex Watches, Avon Cosmetics, Abbott Laboratories, Seagram's. Their world headquarters is in Montreal. But then I had an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign in America with powerful, logical reasons why you should not do drugs. And then I saw the campaign that won, and it terrified me. And it was, this is your brain, the guy holding an egg, cracking the shell, dropping the egg into a sizzling frying pan. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And it terrified me. And the reason it terrified me was I'm an expert. I'm considered an advertising whiz kid. I'm just work with so many of the world's top companies. And yet this was emotional selling, not logical. And I'm a logical person. And so I was just, I just freaked out. I like had sleepless nights. But then the scientist in me came out and started thinking, wait a second, could emotional selling be something I learned? And so I had a 3x5 card where I wrote the words, your brain on drugs. So I'd remember that ad because it was terrifying and fascinating me at the same time. And then I got this idea, what if I create a passion box where every time I see an ad or hear something that's emotionally incredible, not logical, emotionally incredible and persuasive, that I drop it in the box in the hopes that eventually all these examples will help me understand how to create emotional selling for myself and for my students. I do lots of work with the US Small Business Administration, et cetera. And after 10 years of putting these incredible ads and quotes, because quotes also are powerful, in the box, something struck me like a bolt of lightning. I met John Gray at this convention, and he's telling me how his book, which is one of the best relationship books ever written, it was called Men, Women, and Relationships, sold only a few thousand copies, and he was frustrated. And he got this crazy idea. What if I changed the title to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and tweak the content a little bit so it's consistent with the title? Guess what happened? From a few
World
thousand
seller.
no, you won't believe how many he sold almost overnight. 500,000, then 1 million, then 2 million, then 5 million. You know how many books he sold? 50 million copies of his book. 50 million. In my book, I describe it. I say 10 million, and his people that help him on marketing said, no, you're way off. It's 50 million. We just passed 50 million books sold. So he went from a few thousand to 50 million just because he changed the title. And I was like, I thought I was gonna, throw up. It's like, wow, that happened. And so I took my passion box and I dumped it on my bed. I discovered first when I wrote the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, I realized that he used a metaphor. I mean, men aren't really from a different planet. At least I don't think we are. All you ladies out there, you might think we're from a different planet. And there's plenty of reason why you think that. But I realized that is metaphors the secret to emotional selling, or one of the secrets. When I dumped the passion box on my bed, I discovered that metaphors is one of 14 brain triggers that makes it, that triggers the emotion centers of the brain where decision making happens. And it makes it much easier to get people to, for what you're saying and what you're selling to resonate with people. And I talk about a lot of selling, like how products and all that stuff. I ran in Southern California, one of America's leading behavioral management firms, and we work with leaders, senior execs in major companies. We work with Warren Buffett brought me in. His team brought me in when he started buying companies, so he would personally own them because he wanted to explode the revenues and growth, and he wanted to build the leadership. I work with major companies like Amgen, the world's largest biotech company, Gannett Media, just tons of companies, and senior management at most of them. And I recognize that persuasion, we're all selling. You and I were talking about it just before this, but everything is selling. If you want to get your kids to bed, you got to sell them, unless you better go to bed, I mean, it's just a selling, but persuasion is really powerful. It helps us get better jobs. It helps us get jobs.
Yeah.
Persuasion helps us get coworkers and bosses to buy into our ideas. You might have a fantastic idea, but if you're not good at explaining it, that people say, no, we're not interested. When you're saying, but it'll change the company, I
Yeah.
mean, think about the people at Xerox PARC, that invented all the computer stuff that Steve Jobs stole, okay? And he suddenly launched the computer industry. They work for Xerox PARC, and they were trying to, somebody must have been really terrible at persuading bosses because they had a breakthrough. And instead, Xerox, kind of disappeared out of the industry. I mean, I guess they still exist because people have Xerox machines, but they could have dominated the computer industry, which has taken over and exploded over the world. So
That's right.
persuasion is so powerful. And I started to realize that, this is your brain on drugs, any question is a metaphor,
Right.
Metaphors is one of, these 14 power tools that help you to get stuff done. I was thinking of this just as we got on. Like metaphors are things like we'll often say, use tools like the Achilles heel. It's your Achilles heel,
Yeah.
or the Trojan horse. I have
But it
this friend.
resonates and people understand what you're talking about when you use those metaphors.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I have a friend and he's struggling about how miserable his life is and everything else. And I said, because I stole this metaphor, I said, You can't live your life looking in the rearview mirror. You'll never get to where you want to go. You need to, you know, you need to look forward. Where do you want to go? And interestingly, as I said that to him, he goes, I don't really know. I said, well, come on. Well, you've been so busy focusing on the rearview mirror, you have no clue where you want to go. Let's figure out. Let's get you to start looking through the front windshield instead of the rearview mirror. Where do you want to go in life? And it just opened up a whole, discussion about stuff that was profound for him, and yet he never thought about it. In fact, I saw this guy who had a T-shirt that said "Life sucks and then you die," and I'm going like, no, this is life right now. It's like we have an
That's
opportunity
right.
to have fun, to enjoy life, to be fascinated by it. And not that, although I do know a few people that can use that T-shirt, by the way, life sucks and then you die. But it's so much fun. That's when I got into brain glue. I loved it because I got to experiment on clients, which is always fun when you're a consultant. We do
Yes,
80,
it
20.
is.
80% of what we do is stuff we know works, and 20% we're experimenting. That kind of is a good idea. Let's see how it works. Now I have sales exploding, which is fun. But it just,
Well,
you gotta have
it
fun.
sounds like it, and you've had such great success with it. But let's pull back the layers of the onion just a little bit. So, what are some of the key success factors of persuasion? Because, we have most of our audience are corporate leaders. There are a few entrepreneur leaders, but corporate leaders, and they're trying to play up, the office politics and cut the red tape and all that kind of stuff. But what are the key success factors that help individuals become better influencers?
There's a core tool called redintegration, not reintegration, but redintegration. And
I have never
redintegration
heard of
is,
that.
it's, I talk to psychologists and they go, we haven't heard of it. I was
Did you
teaching
make
this.
that up, James?
Yeah, exactly. I had these PhDs. They actually call them PsyDs now in psychology. And I said redintegration, not reintegration. And one of them pulls out her phone and starts looking it up. Is this a real term? And then she says, "Oh, look at that! It is a real term." Yeah, yes. Redintegration is the brain's need for completion. It's why we watch crappy movies and TV shows till the end. Okay. I go into the living room. My wife is watching a TV show, and I said, "Is this any good?" She said, "No, it's stupid." I said, "Well, why are you watching it?" So I want to see how it turns out. Okay, got it. Redintegration is why we like symmetry. Okay, it drives my wife nuts. She's more aware of it than me. But some guy has a lazy eye or something. If you cover half his face, he looks like one thing, like one person. You cover the other half, he looks like another person. That drives her nuts. She says, "Look at that guy's face. It's driving me nuts." And it's because we like symmetry. Okay. In fact, I'll give you a secret on this. So Marilyn Monroe used asymmetry. Okay, which a lot of people don't know is how she became super famous. And
How?
Cindy Crawford became super famous doing this also, okay? So Marilyn Monroe, she was originally Norma Jean. I forget what her last name was, Norma Jean something, okay? And her agent said, you should actually change your name to Marilyn. And I think it's her stepfather is named Monroe. So she had Marilyn Monroe, which is, by the way, a brain glue tool, alliteration, Marilyn Monroe, like table topics, like, trick or treat, like Coca-Cola, PayPal,
Right.
TikTok. Is it a coincidence that they use alliteration, the repetition of sound?
No.
No, they know it sticks to the brain. So Marilyn Monroe worked. And she loved Jean Harlow, who back then in the early days of film industry was a big star. And Jean Harlow had platinum blonde hair. So Marilyn actually got the same hairdresser that dyed Jean Harlow's hair to dye her hair exactly the same color. But Marilyn had a beauty mark on her face and she'd covered up with makeup. But one day she's looking at photographs of Jean Harlow, and she notices Jean Harlow has a beauty mark on her face, on her cheek, but sometimes it's on her chin, not on her cheek. And she goes, wait a second. I bet she doesn't even have a beauty mark. I think she's just darkening putting a dot on her face to bring attention to herself. And so
Right.
Marilyn started darkening instead of hiding the beauty mark on her face. And she believes that it helped her become super famous. She was famous, but it helped her become super famous. Cindy Crawford, the supermodel Cindy Crawford, is the same. She has this beauty mark above her lip on the
Her
left
lip.
side. And you're
Yeah.
nodding your head because you even show me where it is. Everybody knows. Okay. When she was a little kid, she begged her mom, "Mommy, please, can you get this removed? Take me to the doctor." And she says right now, "I am so glad my mom didn't get it removed. I believe it had a huge part in my becoming a supermodel." What made me think of that was there's an early advertiser who's really famous. And he did advertising for Hathaway shirts, which, by the way, Hathaway eventually got bought by Warren Buffett. And that's why it's called Berkshire Hathaway, okay, because of Hathaway shirts. But so what he was doing advertising for Hathaway shirts. And so when you look at a shirt, if you're doing advertising for shirts like in a magazine, what would you do? You have a good looking guy wearing one of the shirts with a nice pair of pants, maybe in a nice background, okay? He did that, but he realized that's the same as David Ogilvy. That's what the advertiser's name is, David Ogilvy. He's really famous. And he said, let me put an eye patch on the guy. The guy's not a pirate, but I'll put an eye patch on him. We'll call him the man with the Hathaway shirt. Okay? And you'll flip into a magazine, and you get, wow, a guy with an eye patch on? What's that all about? And it just catches your attention.
Because it differentiated him from others, right? In the same genre.
And so yeah. Like, you can tell a Hathaway shirt ad a mile away because it's a guy with an eye patch on it. But that made me start thinking. And I was at church one day and I saw this woman with a really huge beauty mark. And I said, wow, I wonder if beauty marks is like using asymmetry, the opposite of symmetry. And I started doing some research and I started really, whoa, Marilyn Monroe and Cindy Crawford, they already know this. We're dumb. We are clueless. We don't know this, but they're actually using asymmetry. There's a joke that goes, asymmetry also works with humor. Comedians love it. They'll tell you a line, but they'll end it with something that surprises you, okay? Because we already know what to expect. And so fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, congratulations. It's like, what? I thought it was going to be fool me twice, shame on me. And so like that little twist grabs attention enough that it stands out. I mean, this is a world where we're so over-communicated, bombarded. I heard one of your talks, one of your interviews where you're talking to a recruiter or how to get better jobs. And it's like that even in advertising and getting a job, whatever else, is you're competing against all these gazillion other people or a gazillion other ideas or a gazillion other products. And so when you're presenting something, people are half asleep. You don't realize it, but people are half asleep. You're talking to your boss and you don't realize he's like dealing with the fact that maybe his wife is going to go through a divorce, or maybe they just lost a big client. Maybe they won a big client and he's not sure how they're going to service him. Maybe he's got maybe he's got pain he's got in his stomach and he's worried. And you're talking, hey boss, I got this great idea. And he's going, okay. It looks like he's listening, but he's not listening. If you use a brain trigger, it works. In fact, you use a brain trigger and you are brilliant on it. It's shockingly different leadership. Okay? Yeah. I think it's like, what?
Yeah.
And you're right, because you're waking up the brain. You're waking up the brain.
Exactly why we used it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're brilliant. You understand that you're competing against all these people, and no matter how great your product is, it's like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Men, Women, and Relationships was a fabulous book. But without a great title, nobody's going to read it, With a great title, you're in a store.
Individual use that, though. If I'm trying to present a presentation or idea to the C-suite, how can an individual use either asymmetry or differentiation? How do you build that in? Is it something conscious that you build in to catch their attention up front?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Is that what you're trying to do?
If you go through Brain Glue, it's got examples, lots of examples, then an exercise so you can actually apply it. And I did Jack Canfield. Sorry, I forgot your name, Jack. Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he sold 500 million books. Can you imagine? 500 million books. 100 million Chicken Soup for the Soul and 400 million of the other chicken soup for the teenage soul, chicken soup for a cancer survivor soul, and stuff like that. And so he doesn't need me telling him anything. But he was pissed at me. He said, I started reading your damn book and I couldn't put it down. It was ridiculous. I got so many books to read and I couldn't. I'm apologizing. I'm sorry. Can I use that as a quote? And he says, yeah. And there's a whole story behind that. I'll tell you that in a second. But so when we're presenting an idea, so you could use metaphor analogy. I'll use Warren Buffett because so many people love Warren Buffett. Certainly all the media love Warren Buffett. And part of why they love him is because he loves analogies and metaphors. So here's one of my favorite lines. Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked.
Wow, yes.
What's he saying? He's basically saying only when times get tough do you realize who's really capable and who's not capable.
That's right.
But when you say it as a metaphor, whoa, it resonates, it sticks to the brain. And it's true. Only when the tide goes out, hey, look, that guy's naked,
Yeah.
But it resonates and it helps you understand how powerful it is. Things like, I think I talked to you about this before, but Achilles heel, Trojan horse. There are things that we say that when we explain something. So the movie Jaws was a blockbuster. And so when they tried to sell movie Alien, They said it's just like Jaws, but in space. It's Jaws. Think of us as Jaws in space. And people went, oh, okay. Of course, the investors, well, we want a Jaws type movie if you're going to make that kind of money. And they invested in it. And so analogies and metaphor are one of many powerful tools. I'll give you another tool, creating expectation. Okay. And so there are a lot of, Michael Jackson was the king of
Oh,
pop.
pop. Yes.
Okay. Muhammad Ali was the greatest. I am the greatest. Well,
Of
Muhammad
all
Ali said,
time.
I am the greatest. And it affected, guess who it affected more than anybody else? Him. He
Him.
said, by
Yes.
telling the public I am the greatest, I suddenly raised the bar that I better raise up to the bar. Otherwise, they're going to start laughing at me.
That's
And so it
right.
forced me to be better than everybody else. And he is very, you talk about being intellectual. He was very intellectual. He was probably the most intellectual fighter around. And so the things he would say, just resonated so much. So setting expectations. So if I said, okay, I'm going to tell you something, you're going to feel like you've heard it before, but just give me a chance, because about 30 seconds into this thing, you're going to start to go, whoa, okay? And then I start telling you something. I'm setting the expectation so it's easier for you to accept. I had this thing. I was in a networking group, a high-end networking group, and I wanted to connect with this guy who's an investment banker, very high-end investment banker, worked with some of the hugest, over $1 billion fund and all that stuff. And in the company, in the networking group, we put our profile. So I put my profile, and I was talking about like brain glue, and I want to talk about how you do behavior change. And he said, oh, yeah, I saw you're a consultant. I said, no, I'm not a consultant. I've got this. He said, no, don't worry about it. You're a consultant. Anyway, what do you want to talk about? And it's like, no matter what I said, I couldn't get past the fact that I'm not a consultant. I'm a behavioral management specialist, and I've got this thing, okay? And so I got mad, and I wrote in capital letters, I am not a consultant, okay? In capital letters and parens. Right. Then I left my bio there. And I remember I was sitting in a group, and somebody said, so describe who you are. And somebody says, he's not a consultant. So they must have read my bio. But it set the expectation. And when you set the expectation, it's so powerful that you can use tools that, that suddenly explode, that make it easier for people to accept what you're saying.
But before you get that tool, there was one thing that you mentioned I want to make sure we get to. What are the trigger words that sabotage persuasion? Because I want people to know what can sabotage your persuasion efforts as well.
And that's very important to know. I want to give a personal example first, okay?
All right.
So I have a son and 3 daughters, and our oldest daughter has 3 kids, and they're young. The oldest is like 5 or 6 years old. And the middle daughter, they were at a park, and the oldest, the son and the daughter, our granddaughter, hit something and fell unconscious.
Oh, man.
And they were freaked out. And her brother was freaked out, okay?
And
so they helped her and everything else, and she came to. And then my daughter turned to Thatcher, our grandson, and said, don't worry, she wouldn't have died. And then she realized, oh, my God. And he was like, oh, by using that word, she wouldn't have died. It would have been okay. He wasn't even thinking of that.
Right.
And she planted the seed in his mind. And she said, I felt terrible, because you can't take it back once you say it, And so as soon as she said that, don't worry, your sister wouldn't have died, she planted the idea in his mind that couldn't be removed, that terrified him. And so we have to remember that there are certain things we're going to say that will have a profound impact. So let me give you a perfect example. I did Dale Carnegie and Toastmasters. I learned how to talk. In fact, my wife said, they taught him how to talk. They just didn't teach him how to shut up. So thanks, Dan. Anyway, that's wives. What can I say? Okay. But that's why I wrote the book. I get to talk.
Hey, you should tell her that's what attracted you to her. So she's got to love it.
That's a good one. So I don't think it'll work by me. But anyway, Toastmasters has a really profound tool that we all need to use, and it's called a sandwich. And it works this way. If I want to criticize somebody, you always say something positive, then give your feedback, and then give a positive. And so in Toastmasters, they would say something like, you're a fabulous speaker. You always have such interesting talks. But, you were looking at the left side of the room and not the right side of the room, and it almost felt like you were talking to them and not to us. But otherwise, I can't wait to hear your next talk. I just find it so interesting. So what did I do? I criticized you, but I sandwiched it in such a way that you felt, I didn't say, you're stupid. You're just such a terrible talker. You always look at the left side of the room. Don't you look at the rest of, what about the rest of the people in this room? By saying that, it affects us differently. And so it's important for us to understand that, there's a pattern to how we communicate. And when you become more effective in how you communicate, it becomes easier to lead people. It becomes easier to get people to buy your products and services, your ideas. And let me give you another tool of brain glue that's really powerful. And
Okay.
it's humor, but here's how it works. Okay. Humor is very important. I've got two friends who are in the top 100 attorneys in the country. One is top 10. And both of them, I was talking to them about this as I was going through brain glue. And they kind of went like, okay, you figured us out. Okay. They tell jokes or when you go into a trial, they would actually get the judge and the jury laughing at some of the things they say. And when you can get them laughing at some of the things you say, they become much more responsive to what you're saying, and you have a better chance of getting a not guilty or whatever you're trying to process. And they said that it's a secret that we use, but it's tremendously powerful. And the reason is because there are two chemicals that go through our body that get triggered by our brain. There's cortisol and oxytocin. And cortisol is the fight or flight drug, basically. Okay. It's like if I piss you off, you're going to be mad, and it stays in the bloodstream for up to 36 hours. So if you're talking to your boss, man or woman, let's say a woman, and her husband did something that pissed her off, or he's thinking of divorce, for 36 hours, she may be totally unresistant or totally resistant to what you're presenting. You say, hey, look, I got this great idea. I don't want to hear about it. Like, go away. You may not be that, but even subtly they're acting that way. It's like, okay, tell me what it is. No, we're not interested. Okay. But oxytocin gets triggered by two things, by jokes and by something really, really fascinating. It's engaging. That's a tougher one, but jokes are easier. Okay. So I was
Right.
doing a turnaround of a martial arts equipment company. And when you're doing a turnaround, people are afraid they're going to lose their job. The owner's afraid he's going to go bankrupt. He's going to have to, everybody's afraid. And so I started with this joke, and I said, I don't know why I came up with this joke, but they tortured me with this joke, okay? Because I said, I worked with them for over a year. So I said, so the maintenance man is hiding in the maintenance closet. And whenever people would come close, he would open the door and scream, supplies! Not surprise,
Da
supplies.
da da da.
Okay, so during the year that I was working with them, I'd look inside somebody's office and I'd see somebody with tremendous stress on their face. I don't know if we didn't have enough product or if they had an unhappy customer or whatever it was. Okay, we didn't have enough supplies, but I could see stress on their face. Maybe it was something personal. I looked through the window, so I'd open the door and say, "Hey, how's it going?" And almost every one of them would go, "Supplies." And you'd see their body language change,
Yeah.
because part of when we're doing a turnaround, we want people to be as creative as possible. But
Yeah.
when you're stressed, it turns
It
off
de-stresses
creativity.
them.
And so you want to trigger oxytocin in the bloodstream. And the way you do it is with a joke or whatever else. I got a great joke. Sorry. I got to run this one by you. I'm a sort of religious person. Okay. And so mommy is sitting there, and a little girl comes up to her and says, "Mommy, I don't understand. You say we came from Adam and Eve, but Daddy says we came from apes." And she says, "Daddy's talking about his family. I'm talking about my family."
Oh, that's cute. I like that one.
That was fun. I mean, it's like when you tell a joke. I'm terrible at joke telling. I'll do conferences with this U.S. Small Business Administration. I'll have like 300 or 500 people there. And I'll tell them I'll try a joke and I'll be really bad. So they'll come up to me sometimes and they'll give me a joke. Oh, at an intermission, tell this joke. This will be easy. You won't mess it up at all. And I still mess it up. So, but
Well,
people
you know
laugh.
what
So
I think about humor, though? I think that it just disarms individuals. It's a connection tool to others. It quickly opens the doors to relate. It's authentic. And to your point, it de-stresses people in the moment
it
and
makes them
sets it
much
up
more
for more.
receptive too to your
Yeah.
ideas. I mean, I think it's sad that people like Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock, they don't do colleges anymore because they're afraid they're going to offend somebody. It's
You
like
got to go for it. You can't be
humor is
afraid
the
of
best
that.
medicine.
It
Humor
sure
is the
is.
best medicine. Physically, physiologically, you live longer. I mean, I was telling you, I saw a guy with a T-shirt that said "Life sucks and then you die." No, this is fun right now. You got to have fun right now. I mean, bad things are going to happen to you. I got that. Okay, they happen to all of us. But you have to recognize this is life. This is not practice. It isn't like we're practicing for the next one, although it might be. That's after we die. But it's just what you want to do is, enjoy life and share joy with other people. And when you do that, people love me being a consultant for their company because I'm always telling jokes. I seem like, I focus on quality of life for people.
Yeah.
Instead of they're going to lay off like about 100 people or something like that. I'm going like, let's figure out how to solve this so we don't have to lay anybody off.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you have to if it's hard times or whatever else, but just people at least accept the fact that I love this. That Costco, I work with Saul Price, who was the founder of Price Club that eventually merged into Costco and all that stuff. And then the guy who started Costco used to work for Saul Price. And Costco is the highest paying retailer that's out there. Okay. They're the highest paying retailer. They have benefits and everything else. People go, and yet it sells the cheapest products. How can that be? How can they pay people so much and they sell cheap products? And it's because he figured out the process. And the process is you want to have employees that love working there, that they feel like we're all partners, we're all in it together. And when you
Yeah.
can do that, few companies have one guy. I mean, even Steve Jobs, I always love saying this in big conferences. Who wants to work for a jerk? Raise your hands. Come on, who wants to work for a jerk? Oh,
Nobody.
come on. Somebody who's going to steal your idea and pretend it's his own. Come on, raise your hands. Come on. Who wants to work for, someone who's going to humiliate you in front of coworkers? Come on, raise your hand. And then I show a photograph of Steve Jobs, which he did a lot of that. Okay.
He did a
But
ton.
they loved working for him because he was passionate and he was changing the world and they're changing the world.
Yeah.
And so that's, those things are really important. It's like when you get deeper into understanding like what is, profound. Okay. And then that's where brain glue comes in. How do you explain it in a way that people go like, whoa, I like that. And I'll go back to the movie Alien, we're going to give you Jaws in space. And they went, Jaws in space? Oh, that's really cool, Then he goes to his wife, the guy, if it's a guy or a girl, and they say, hey, yeah, I'm investing in a movie that's Jaws in space. Jaws in space? Oh, wow, that's interesting. So it's going to be like, you're going to have sharks? Well, not sharks, they're going to be, but it's like, it's easier to explain. And that's the biggest problem
Resonates.
people have is, so I want to give you an example also of something else, but it relates to this.
Okay, well, real quick, because we want to give you one more question before we wrap up.
Okay. So we also want to understand perspective. That's why Jaws in space is powerful because you want to give people perspective. I love this line. So people say Americans discard 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour. Wow, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it?
It does every
2.5
hour.
million plastic bottles every hour. That's enough to reach the moon every 3 weeks.
That's
Now, I
even
don't know about you,
bigger.
but that's like terrifying to me. But I gave you perspective because when you throw a number at people, they go, oh, yeah, it sounds like a lot, like 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour. But how much is that? If I tell you it's enough to reach the moon every 3 weeks, oi, oh, wow, that is frightening. But now you gave them perspective. And a lot of times we're going to say something with it, and people are going to nod their heads, but we don't realize that they don't understand what we're saying. And that's why it's important to focus on perspective. Because if you give them perspective, then you can even see it in their face. They go like, oh, interesting. So
Right. Well, my final question for you, James. So, thank you so much for those great stories and examples. They are so clear for our listeners. But what we always like to do is hear from our guests on which of the execution tactics that I read about in my book resonate with you. And you were so kind to share that you really love leading with intellectual horsepower. And for any new listeners, leading with intellectual horsepower is all about using your areas of expertise to kind of peek around corners and to spot trends or opportunities that others miss. So I'm just curious for you, James, why does leading with intellectual horsepower resonate for you?
because it's not what people say, but what they mean that's important. And we have to understand intellectually. We get the greatest ideas intellectually, but we also have to understand that how we understand it and how they understand it is often very different. And so that to me,
Right.
it's but the intellectual level that you're going to get the best ideas, the best results, the best understanding of like, wow, look at what we could achieve. But you also want to be able to communicate that. So yeah, to me, it's the
Yes.
concept of intellectual horsepower, leading with intellectual horsepower. That's what leadership is all about. You want people to follow you. You don't want to be pulling people. You want to be like Steve Jobs,
Right.
I mean, he was just, people go like, oh, that's what we're doing. We're inventing, we're changing the world. Yeah.
And they did. And you had people that were fanatics, around Steve. So All right. Well, we will have all the information about brain glue in the show notes, James. But really quickly, can you let people where they can find, on what platforms they can find your book? Amazon, anything else?
Yeah, Amazon is the easiest place to find it. If you go to braingluebook.com, it'll take you right to the Amazon page. You don't have to search around for it. And then, we've got an audiobook too, so you can listen to samples. Amazon lets you listen to samples and look at parts of the book too. And so hopefully you buy it. But even if you don't, you can look at it and it will give you all the different brain glue tools. And I think it resonates with lots of people. They recognize like this is powerful stuff.
All right.
So
Well, listeners.
braingluebook.com is an easy way to find it.
Okay, well, we will definitely have all the information in the show notes. Listeners, go out and definitely get your copy of Brain Glue. You won't be disappointed. James has a ton more examples in his book, just like he shared here on the podcast. And thank you, James, for the gift of your time and insights today. We really appreciate you.
Oh, Karen, thank you so much. This was lots of fun.
Oh, wonderful. And thank you too, listeners. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Have a good one. Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today with James Bond, author of the book Brain Glue. Links to his bio, his entry into our leadership playbook, and additional resources can be found in the show notes, both on your favorite podcast platform of choice and on the web at leadyourgamepodcast.com. And now for Karen's take on today's topic of persuasive emotions. Now, we all know that emotions are complex, right? But psychologists say that we only have 6 basic emotions, which are happiness, anger, sadness, fear, surprise, and disgust. And all of our other emotions that we have are really built from these 6 basic emotions. For example, jealousy stems from a combined feeling of anger or sadness, while satisfaction is actually a type or a degree of happiness. Scientists have discovered that the thoughts that cause emotions usually answer questions like the following. 1, is what happened unexpected? 2, is what happened enjoyable? 3, is what happened going to make it easier or harder for me to get what I want? 4, can I take control of what happens next? 5, will I be able to cope? 6, does what happened match with what I think is right or wrong? And 7, is what happened my fault or someone else's? And so I encourage you to take the time to learn more about the role of emotions in decision making, because this would definitely be time very well used. Add it to your task list, and I'll also include a few resources in the show notes to get you started. But I hope today's info helps jumpstart your thinking a bit. And if you'd like to learn more about developing leadership in action, we have more information on our programs on the web at developingyourgame.com. Thanks again for joining this episode. Please remember to subscribe and share with a friend, and continue to have a fantastic week and to lead at the top of your game. Thanks for listening, and see you next week. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.